Alright guys, it's me again. It's Nathan, Total Environmental Cooling and Heating. Again, I'm on the road running service calls. Thought I'd take a minute. I left the lady's house out in Azle, and she's renting. We take care of some rental properties, and she was kind of been going back and forth. The property owner been putting band-aids on the unit. That's kind of what they do in rental properties, and you know, we keep them fixed up. You know, we don't like to go back a bunch of times to put band-aids on, but you know, if the property owner is willing to work with us, you know, we can make a good solid repair. That's what we do. We're not trying to change the system out in every case, but this particular one, it's bad. You know, it was almost completely empty, and it's on R22, so it didn't make any sense to put, you know, more expensive refrigerant in a unit. It's like, I want to say it was either 13 or 17 years old. I can't remember off the top of my head, but has nothing to do with the topic of this video. It's encapsulated houses. Spray foam, I think they call it closed cell polycellulose, maybe. I may have that last one wrong. I'm not a spray foam or encapsulated home expert, but I did take a continuing education class on encapsulated homes, and so here's some interesting facts. The lady tells me, she's like, well, you know, I'm about to spend a whole bunch of money building a new house, so I really don't care what this guy does. I just want to have enough cooling until my house is built. And so we got to talking about that. She asked me a couple questions about air conditioner, and I'm sure you figured out from these videos, I love to talk about air conditioning. So we got to talking, and she said she was going to spray foam the entire house. And I cautioned her on that because, again, I am not a spray foam professional. We're at a red light in case you're wondering if I'm paying attention to the road or not. I'm not a spray foam professional. Never said I was. But some of the classes we've been taking have explained that totally encapsulating your house has a couple of issues that you need to know about. Here we go. Before you do it. The first issue that they're finding, when you totally seal up a house, you know, essentially the same as a Yeti cooler, they don't breathe. So we have to introduce what we call ERV, I think they call them ARVs or something like that, whole home ventilation or energy recovery ventilation systems. We have to introduce these. The house is so tight. So I told the lady, imagine this, you know, it's winter time and the roads are frozen over and it's Friday night and the whole family's there from out of town. And you've got plenty of food, plenty of stuff to drink, and so really nobody's probably going to go outside all night long, and maybe most of the day it's been closed up, and maybe again almost all the next day. Maybe it's just wet and nasty. Nobody wants to go outside. Wet, nasty, cold. There's nowhere they really need to go, so y'all just inside watching movies and cooking food. If you don't have whole home ventilation on that, you could breathe up all the usable good oxygen. That sounds crazy, but absolutely, red light again, absolutely, completely and totally possible for a house that's got double the number of people that normally would, that aren't closing or aren't opening any doors regularly, to breathe up, you know, all the good oxygen in the house. Now, I'm not saying it's going to kill you, but you're going to get like that stuffy, like muggy, kind of groggy headache feeling inside of the house. So that's one of the drawbacks that we're finding about the encapsulated home. But that was real quick. We figured that out real quick, and we started with ERV, or whole home energy recovery. Whole home ventilation systems. The next one we started to figure out was moisture problems. So we're finding out that the closed cell spray foam, if it gets moisture in it, it is just close to impossible to get that moisture out. It seeps out real slow. So some of the drawbacks to that is, well, now you spray this all over typically what would be considered almost green lumber in your house, because I mean, when you're screwing together or nailing together a house, or you're using typical construction lumber, that typical construction lumber, I mean, you can squeeze the moisture out of it. You know, you drive a screw in that and it'll squeeze out moisture. When you're building with wood, it ages. They kiln drying wood so that they can kind of get a jump on the aging process and get all the moisture out, leave all the sap in, and the wood gets to age real slowly so that it doesn't warp or creep. The idea in building a house is over time there's enough, the house breathes enough that you don't have to worry about that. The house is going to age in that shape over time. And if you've ever been up in your attic in a house that's 15 or 20 years old, you can see where the sap's kind of bubbled out and dewing up in areas. That's aging, that's drying, that's what the house was. They knew that would happen in the design of the house. So when we spray foam these brand new houses that we're still building with the same lumber we always built with, it's making them susceptible to moisture problems. Some of that happens to be mold, any other type of mildew, or anything that you just take a chance on the wood rotting inside of that cellulose. So this is an issue that seems to be a problem, or we're becoming aware may be a problem. Again, let me just disclaim here, this is just all stuff in the industry, guys talking back and forth, a couple of continuing education classes I've taken, things like that. The third drawback that we're finding in the industry, by industry I mean HVAC industry, is we're stuck on this idea that 500 or 600 square feet or 700 square feet get a ton of air conditioning. That's just this mindset that we have, and so the rule of thumb worked great for us until about 1996, when Energy Star homes, more efficient homes were starting to be built. That doesn't work, guys. You can't, if you're building a cooler that holds ice for 5 days when the old cooler would only hold it for a day and a half, well, you can't expect to need the same amount of air conditioning. You can use a smaller air conditioner on your let's just call it your Yeti home. You can use a smaller air conditioner. Problem becomes with a smaller air conditioner is making sure it runs enough and that it exchanges all of the air in the home enough to get the moisture out. So yeah, we can use less tonnage, but are we exchanging the air, enough cubic feet of air in enough time to get the moisture out of the house? Because that's what your air conditioner does. It pulls moisture out of the home. So on top of that, we've always kind of been in this fixed tonnage format where 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, jump straight to 5. So that becomes a problem because the load, the amount of heat loss or gain to the house is real different. It's a lot slower when you have a totally encapsulated house. So you have to prepare for that. Now, I recommended that the lady save the money. Oh, sorry, let me back up one more thing. Another issue that people aren't taking into consideration, because what our first thought is if we can keep our attic cool, that'll keep the rest of the house cool, which is correct. If the heat doesn't make it into the attic, then it doesn't push down inside of the, through the attic spaces. So one of the things that we're not thinking about is when we spray the roof line. And what I mean is when you're attic, you spray up and you're spraying the decking that's actually on your roof, and you spray that with the foam. That's great. We keep the heat from the roof decking and the shingles from permeating through into the attic, and that does help with energy efficiency. But what we're not thinking about is now those shingles have to endure all of that heat. They have to take all of that solar abuse. You've got this Yeti foam, this super insulating foam on the backside, so the heat doesn't have anywhere to go. It just sits there and resonates and builds up. So my recommendation on this house for this lady was to go with the absolute highest fiberglass insulation that she could have in the walls. And they have, I think they've got like antimicrobial and stuff now. I mean, it's getting crazy. But told her to go with the absolute highest insulation that her contractor would put in the wall, which was probably going to be R15, possibly R19, but most likely R15 fiberglass bat. Make sure she got good windows, and then spray foam the attic floor, and put in ridge vent, possibly a power ventilator, and as much eave soffit as she can. And what this will actually do for her is this will insulate, obviously, her attic floor, which will keep excessive attic heats from making it the way in. And where they make their way in is through your, people like recessed lighting, ceiling fans, things like that. The heat finds its way in through those spots. It just kind of forces its way into your house through those areas. So this will help keep that heat from making its way through there. It'll also, they have a really cool chemical that you can put, you just spray right over the top of the foam, and it turns that foam into like a walkable surface. I've seen it, I've worked on top of it. It's excellent, I love it. So now you can have a kind of a big space that you don't necessarily have to have decking on, that you can safely put a reasonable, you know, probably, I'd say at least 200 pounds per 18 inches square. I mean, reasonably, something like that. You know, maybe, you know, for every 2x2 square, you could put, say, 100 pounds or 65 pounds per square foot would be a reasonable load. That's just guesswork on my part, but just from my experience on that I've stood, you know, I don't take up a 2x2 square by any means, but I've stood, and I'm about 200 pounds. I've stood in about what I'd say is about a 14x14 space and didn't fall through. So that makes for a really great space. The house gets to breathe a little bit because we didn't seal up the walls perfectly, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but I mean, we need fresh air, guys. And then with all that good ventilation you put in the attic, now your shingles are composite shingles, but they're breathing. They're actually staying a little cooler than they may have in other situations. And so that air is moving through your attic, and it's helping preserve the life of that composite shingle. So yes, there is the drawback to now your attic space still gets a little bit warm, but in honesty, if you get enough ventilation in your attic, if you get it done right and you're moving enough air through your attic, it shouldn't be much hotter than what it is outside. So that basically makes your attic space, if it's ventilated well, as good a storage spot as your garage would be. So if it's good enough to go in the garage, and it should be good enough to go in an attic that's well ventilated. An example of a well ventilated attic is either tile or old cedar shake. Now, we don't do old cedar shake anymore because it's a fire hazard. But, you know, I used to work in cedar shake attics that you can see the light coming through. You can see daylight through. And those things were, man, they were amazing to work in. You know, very, very comfortable. Even on a hot day, you know, they were shaded. And yeah, it was 105 degrees outside, but you were working in the shade of 105 degrees because the air just blew right through them. So if you can get plenty of air through the attic, you can actually, I mean, it's a huge benefit, and it turns that space back into a storage space equivalent to your garage with the quality of storing something in your garage. So I recommended that to her, and then I told her if she decides that she's going to go ahead and just bite the bullet and encapsulate the house, go with, you know, I don't know about other manufacturers, but I know Lennox has some great variable volume compressors, which just means that the compressor goes from 35% of its capacity all the way up to 100% of its capacity, and it does this as the house needs it. This means the unit runs a little bit more, but it runs more efficiently while it is running, but it also removes more humidity. An encapsulated home, we just talked about, has humidity issues, and it filters the air better, which we could all use better filtered air. Back at a red light. We could all use better filtered air. And then I recommend you put in Lennox, the manufacturer's dehumidifier. This is probably the best way to control humidity when you use the Signature Series equipment with the variable volume compressor, communicating setup with that whole home dehumidifier, I mean, you really can't get better control over your environment if you're going to have a fully encapsulated house. And I don't, and you know, we have high enough humidity levels in our region. You know, even if you spray foam the floor of your attic and do regular installation, pretty standard build, all the rest of it, there's nothing wrong with putting a whole home dehumidifier in. So as long as the engineer for your house has calculated for it, it is not a bad idea at all. You know, it makes sense. So to make a long story short, which is impossible at, you know, 15 minutes and 40 seconds here, to make a long story short, if you're going to encapsulate your house, know what that means. Know the ups and the downs of encapsulating your home. Know what kind of products and equipment you need. Know what different types of encapsulated homes. You know, there's SIPS houses, and there's a couple different ways to do heavily insulated houses. So make sure you have that information before you get into it, because you need your house to breathe so the lumber can dry. You need your attic to breathe so the shingles can stay. I mean, most houses have composite shingles, so you need those to stay as cool as they can, so you can get the most life out of them as possible. And yeah, we want to be energy efficient, but we also want to be comfortable. We want the air in our house to be clean and cool and not too wet. We don't want any areas for moisture to build up so we can grow some funky stuff. You know, I mean, most people have allergies these days. So that's it, guys. I'm Nathan with Total Environmental. We're out of Saginaw, Texas. We love to answer questions, so put your comments down below. Like our channel and share our videos. And if we get comments and someone says, hey, well, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, I love talking air conditioning. If I don't know, I sure will try to go and find that information for you. So until then, look us up on the internet. It's totalehvac.com. We're on Facebook as Total Environmental Cooling and Heating. I can't remember all the other handles, guys. You know, I'm an air conditioning guy, not a social media guy. So look us up, follow us, download the app. You can find it by searching the company name, Total Environmental, on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Have a great day.